Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Face Off, or Face Off, as I'd like to say. It's kind of funny how, like, we have just continued to do, like, body swapping movies and they still work. It's surprising. Like, we'll go on and we'll still get, like, movies like the Vince Vaughn film, like, Freaky, and it just works. But in this movie, we have, like, this big budgeted, like, action movie that, of course, people are to thoroughly enjoy, and it's with these kind of really big named actors, and so it's like, yeah, like, plus it actually makes sense for us to, like, kind of have someone in disguise as someone else to try and get information. And so, like, this is the only time where it really actually does really work. So going into this film, I thoroughly enjoy it. It's a very enjoyable piece. I would say that it's a great movie. There's stuff about it that probably still, like, that probably doesn't hold up, like the times where Nicolas Cage is to have John Travolta's voice. I think I also wanted to review this because of the challenge of, like, well, uh, John Travolta is supposed to be Nicolas Cage's character, and Nicolas Cage is supposed to be John Travolta's character, and but I think the one interesting thing about this movie is we have characters that, like, we have Castor Troy, who's like the high energy character, and we have Sean Archer, who's kind of like the low, like, depressing or depressed kind of guy who is just to be, like, going through, like, some real, like, hard problems with him looking at his face the whole entire time, realizing that, like, he's wearing the face of his enemy, and to really just be kind of forced into this project because it makes the most sense. So and then also to have, like, this guy, like, jump through all these hoops to go on and figure out like, how he's going to get back to who he really is. That's the fascinating part about this movie, as well as we also have Troy, or Castor Troy, who wakes up from his coma, is like, hey, what the heck is going on? Like, well, if this person is to play me, then I'm to play him. And it's like the kind of the back and forth struggle between these two characters, the fun ride of this film. And body swapping movies, eventually they work. But also, just high energy, low energy. It's and plus, John Travolta, while doing this movie, was to be very surprised what Nicolas Cage was bringing to the table for his villainous character. And so John was thinking, it's like, oh my god, like, I'm gonna have to pull this off. And and so John went and asked Nick, is like, well, that's seriously what you want to do for the villain side of things? And Nicholas is just like, yeah, that's what I want to do, like, just to, like, really counterbalance what you're going to bring to the table. So we also had, like, John talk about, there was one moment where and this is in the actor's studio thing, so you can hear the whole interview, I'm sure, somewhere. John Travolta was talking with Nicolas Cage, and Nicolas Cage was talking about wanting to buy a very expensive piece of glass, and John was like, I don't think I ever want to go on and do that, but, like, I get what you're saying. So yeah. Plus, also, Nicolas Cage has a very interesting, like, amount of things that he's purchased over time. I would love to go on and, like, kind of go through, if there was ever a tour of Nicolas Cage's house. Like, I would just like to go on and just, like, see all the stuff that he just bought at some point, just to be fascinated. Just be fascinated by just random stuff that he probably bought at some point, because it would be really cool. But anyways, let's go on. Let's go into spoilers. It's a body swapping film because at the end of the day, it's about that time to say, let's just go into spoilers. Teeing it up a little bit more. So we have this kind of grief moment in the very beginning of this film, which is drive Sean to go after Castor Troy. Troy ends up getting caught in the early stage of this film, and then there seems to be a bomb threat that needs Sean to go under disguise as Castor, and then after it seems that Sean is to get this information as Castor, Sean then goes on and thinks that okay, his job is done, and come to find out, not so much. So with that said, that's like the easy, quick teeing it up part of this film, and some pretty good. I think my favorite line of the movie is honestly when Castor Troy is like, "I'm ready, ready for the big ride, baby." That's the best line of that whole movie. And then towards the end of the film, they end up doing that line again, which I thought was so interesting. So with that said, I think it's time to get ready for the big ride, because otherwise that time to just go into spoilers about this one. Let's go into where can you go on and see this film? Currently, right now, like there of course is to be a $2.99 fee to rent this movie through YouTube's and Amazon's and all that jazz. I can also give you a number of apps that I've used over a certain amount of time. Hopefully, that way you can go on and say you can see Face Off for absolutely free. So, first off, you can go into a Google search and search the words Letter C Movies app. Hopefully, you'll dare, in fact, after you put those words in. So, that's a letter and that's a word. After you go on and Google search those words, hopefully, you'll be able to find an app that you can dare, in fact, download, that you can go on and say that you could see whatever you like, premium access stuff, old movies, new movies, TV series, stuff that you could only exclusively see if only you were to have certain apps. You could watch Halo right now. You could watch whichever movies that are currently brand new for you to see. You can also go on to a Google search and search for Fox HD Movies, and whatever I say next, just follow what I just said before, because eventually you'll go on to seeing a logo that'll say Fox HD Movies, but a title that'll say Play 1080p HD Movies. You can also go on to a Google Play Store, search the word TV Crush, and you'll be able to find an app where it says HD Movies with the crown off to the side. And justifyingly enough, hopefully you'll be able to watch Face Off either way. If not, then you'll be able to find a number of movies that you'll see for absolutely free. There's the tagline for you. So yeah, I think it's about that time to just go into spoilers about this film. Beginning of the film, and I'll have to kind of creatively figure out a way to figure out how to. I think people will completely understand when I go on and just say like, okay, this person is playing this person now, and we'll be able to shift that way. I can go on to talk about the actors' names. That'll be a lot easier. I don't know. We'll figure something out. So in the beginning of this movie, we have Sean Archer, who is at a merry-go-round with his kid Mike. We of course have Castor, who is having a sniper rifle on Sean, wanting to take him out. So we of course have Castor, who is to shoot into Sean here, and whereas we assume that Sean is going to die, instead we have Mike, who is to be killed off here, and because of the grief of that, we now push on to have Sean be a very hard FBI agent to work with. So we go on, and Sean is going into work, asking if there's any intel that they can kind of squeeze out of anybody, and that he's just kind of wanting everybody to just kind of like, hey man, like let's go on and let's get something. So to really just show that this character is to really change who he is at a certain point of this film. So we have, of course, Castor, who is to be who is to be getting to go into this plane with, of course, his brother named Pollux, who, of course, Castor is to call Pollux bro, and of course, Pollux is to not like it. We also have it where Castor is to go on and usually tie Pollux's shoes, because I guess this guy is never really to have tied his shoes, so Castor is to normally tie his shoes for him. So we go on here and we have Castor, who is getting ready to go on this plane, and Sean is chasing after him. So because Sean, of course, is to get this intel that Pollux is waiting on this plane, it's like, well, like, that means that Castor is not is going to be kind of shortly there behind. So Castor and Pollux get on this plane, and so now we of course have Castor, who's talking to this stewardess, because it doesn't look like a normal stewardess, and so we go on, and that's where we have the line where it's like, "Peach, I can eat a peach for hours," and Castor is to go on and is to have this girl sit on his lap, and he is to mention, it's like, well, hey, like, if you could suck on my tongue, would you be grateful? So this girl goes on and kisses Castor, and then all of a sudden we have Sean, who is chasing after him with every single FBI and helicopter that he can muster, and we of course had this chase out, and I'm like, this reminds me just like the movie SWAT, because I'd recently seen SWAT, where at the end of that movie we have like the limo chasing down the plane, and like, hey, here's when all the car chases that you've ever seen is going to be paying off. So they go on, and so Sean is to try to play chicken with this plane. We of course have Castor, who is to push this woman off of him to try and push these pilots to like keep on flying, and we have, of course, this officer who's to whip out these guns, and so before Sean does like play chicken with this plane, Castor goes and opens up this door of this plane and is to chuck this girl out of it, because she's to reveal that she's an FBI agent. Castor is to chuck her out, and that's when then Sean tries to play chicken with this plane, because there's nothing else that he can do at this point. So when Sean is to lose at playing chicken with this plane, and we just have the Hummer where it squeals the wheels and stuff like that, Sean goes onto the helicopter and is to commandeer that to just try to figure out how to make it to where this plane just will not like take off. So we have at one point where the plane is kind of like starting to lift certain flaps, and Sean is trying to smush those flaps back down. So it's like, no, you're not going to take off. So at some point we just have it where this plane is never going to take off, to the point of Castor just putting bullets into these pilots, and so he decides to just kind of go and chase off, to run into these hangars, where of course Pollux is to get quickly arrested, and Castor is to go on and try to make his escape, and I believe he is to take down some FBI agent called Benjamin or something like that. So Sean and Castor are going on, and here's where we have like the ready for the big time or big ride, baby. We have that whole scene that plays out here, because I don't give a fuck. So Sean and Archer or Sean and Castor are to go on and bullets ablaze and all this good fun stuff. And so eventually we come to the point where they're both meeting together with their guns, And like we have like the Matrix moment where it's like, oh, you're empty, so are you. So we have these two that go on, and like Caster's realize he doesn't have any bullets, and so he drops to the ground. And he's like, well, I don't give a fuck. So Sean, of course, is to not want to shoot Caster here, but instead, like he just kind of tosses him into this this kind of air tunnel that ends up getting him, like, because I guess like this is where they like test this um like a propeller thing where all of a sudden it's like this air tunnel where they test this air propulsion, and so Caster gets pushed into here and he gets like knocked back and he gets knocked unconscious. So for those of you that are like airplane technicians and whoever airplane specialists, you can let me know exactly what that equipment was, because I didn't research that part. So everything was just I watched the film. So Caster is to, of course, be in a coma, and so we go on and find out that there is to be a bomb that is to be placed somewhere and is going to go off within X number of days. So Sean is to go on and be like, well, like that just means that I'm just gonna have to question everybody affiliated with Castor Troy to try to go and squeeze out information out of them. Going on a meeting with Sasha, going on a meeting with, of course, Dietrich, and so on and so forth. Anybody who is to possibly have information. And really, Sean is to think that talking to Pollock is a waste of time because there's no way that he's going to be saying anything anytime soon. He's not going to be singing like a canary. So all of a sudden, we have a woman who is to come to Sean and offer her services. A girl named Hollis Miller, who, of course, to go and tell Sean that there is a procedure that could go on and make Sean Archer look like Castor Troy. If we have it to where it seems that Pollock is only going to respond to Castor Troy, well, Sean better be Castor Troy so he can squeeze out this information. So Sean, of course, is to go on and realize that he is going into a dead end with his case. And so Sean, of course, is to now go on and talk to his wife, who is Eve, and we of course have Eve, who realizes that Sean is going to go on to some other case soon, because we just have Sean, who is just so like case focused. And so we have it where like Sean and Eve are to have another fight, and Sean is to spend the night in Michael's bed because, of course, we have Castor, or we have Sean, who is Castor in the later part of this movie, who explains that. So we have Sean that gets ready for work that day, and is to go off into switching bodies, because come to find out, they have been keeping Castor alive because he's in a coma. So Sean is looking at Castor and his coma-like body. He's like, oh my god, you're keeping him alive? Like, no. So they go on and they explain in the simplest way this procedure to, of course, Sean, where like this is going to be a temporary thing, that there is to be one guy who had gotten his ear blown off in the previous case, and he is to now get like this permanent like reconstructional ear being done. And so like now, like they're gonna have it where like these guys are temporarily going to face off, uh switch faces. So we go on into this movie, and so Sean is to agree to this procedure, and so they end up cutting into Sean's face, and they cut into Castor's face. And so Sean's face is to be put in this container to kind of keep his skin fresh so they can eventually reapply it. Whereas Castor is to just put, like, be mummified and have bandages all over his face. So Sean is to now be Castor, and he wakes up from this procedure, and he's to look in this mirror, and he starts freaking out. So we have. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just say like Nicolas Cage here for like when Nicolas Cage is like Sean. Like I'm gonna say just Nicolas Cage because it's a lot easier. So Nicolas Cage, of course, is to be looking at this mirror. He doesn't like what he sees. He breaks the mirror, and we have Tito that's convincing Nicolas Cage that he is Sean Archer. So we have like the voice of this character who is to sound like Sean, is to sound like John Travolta. So they now have to go on and showcase because we have this doctor, this Dr. Malcolm Walsh, who is to adjust Sean's voice to sound much more uh, like Castor. So we then go on and send them off. We have, of course, Nicolas Cage, who's to be sent off to go to this prison, and we of course have a number of FBI agents that are watching on as Castor is to, or Nicolas Cage is to be sent to this prison. So we have a bunch of guys who are just to be told that Sean Archer was to go off on some mission, and so like a lot of them are saying like, man, I wish Sean Archer would have been here today to go on and watch like this guy being sent off. So we go on. We have this kind of prison that's in this like oil rig, it seems, and like out in the middle of nowhere. And so we have this prison that that Sean is to be sent to. Come to find out, they have like these metal boots that all of a sudden like turn on. It's like it's like they're magnetized, and I was like, man, that's actually really like it's really a cool idea. Like especially if you want certain characters to like not go anywhere, like you might as well like control them to be in one spot. So Nicholas goes on into this prison, and he's looking around, and so we all of a sudden have a guy who is to be played by Thomas Jane, who is Burke Hicks, and he's like, well, hey, like you forget about the little people. And we of course have we have Cage, who turns to this guy, and he's like, well, hey, like I guess Sean had booked you in prior things, and he's just like, well, yeah, but that was all like a frame up. And it's like, sure it was. So all of a sudden we have Cage, who's going through trying to meet up with Pollux. Come to find out that he is going to meet with a guy named Dubov, who interestingly enough, like I was like, why does Dubov look so familiar? And I'm like, oh my god, that's the same guy from Heels. I'd watched this show that Stephen Mel was on called Heels, and I'm like, oh my god, that's the guy from Heels, and I thought that was so cool. And I was like, there's a reason why this guy looks so familiar. So we go on, and so like we have Cage fighting Dubov, and supposedly like the whole prison thing ends up getting stopped by like Cage going and beating up Dubov, and then deciding like he wants to just stop the fight. So he goes on and like, yeah, I'm Castor Troy. Yeah, I'm Castor Troy. And like, he's like, woo. And so we have, of course, the guard there that is just very like upset with the fact that this guy was going Walter, prison guard Walter, is to go on and stop this fight because only he is to go on and have control when the fights stop. And so Cage is telling Walter or Walton here that hey, like when I get out of here, I'm gonna get you fired. It's like okay, sure, sure you will. So we go on. We have Cage who talks to Pollock, and so Pollock here is to say it's like, well, hey, like it does seem like you're seeming like yourself, and Cage is like, well, I'm just so fried, like I don't know why that like monkey jumped me before, and so Pollock is like, well, like you slept with his wife and his daughter like when he got in here, so that's why he's so upset, and he's like, oh, okay, sure. So they're going on, and Cage is talking about how that bomb like deserves to be in the Louvre, and Pollock is like, well, like I guess the LA Convention Center is gonna have to do, and so like Cage goes and turns to Pollock. He's like, like thank you. He's like, for what? It's like, you know what? You're so pathetic. Goes off and is to within a number of days realize he's going to get, of course, his people coming in to say like, hey, have you gotten the information yet? And of course he has, but sadly enough, Castor is to get a visitor, and it's going to be somebody he does not like. Because what happens is that Castor Troy was in this hospital and he woke up from this coma, and I guess there's no security there. There's nobody watching over this guy. This guy who'd murder a million people. I guess they just didn't think that no problem with this guy. So Castor goes on and he starts calling everybody in the Brother and saying like, well, hey, we're gonna deal with this. So they bring back Dr. Malcolm Walsh to say that like, man, your video, like, bravo, bravo. And so Malcolm Walsh is saying like, well, hey, like, what do you want from me? And Castor is like, well, what do you think that I want? So we then go on and have Castor Troy, who is to look like Sean Archer, and he is to go on and kill everybody who is to know anything about this project, including Tito, including the Dr. Walsh, including the girl who was to put this whole thing together, who of course was Hollis Miller. Kill everybody. And so we have Sean, who is to also be having the wedding ring, and he is to showcase this to, of course, Cage when he is Sean. So we now open this door up, and we now have Castor as Sean. So now I'm gonna just say that this is like Travolta. So that's an easy thing to do. So Cage is now in utter like just misbelief of Travolta now being here, and we now go on and we have like Travolta that's like, ooh wee, you good looking, you hot. And so we have Cage who's like, well, what about the project? And he's like, oh, that project, the project where I killed everybody. See anything you like? You're gonna be here for the next 100 years, and like, and I'm just gonna like watch on as you like rot from here. So, so Travolta is saying to Cage, it's like, well, it's like looking at a mirror, but not. So we have where Cage, of course, gets upset and is to choke Travolta, and the guards come in and smack him, try to and he's like, die. So they go on and they pull him off, and so so Travolta is just be like, well, it's okay, and so he just starts to walk off. So we go on here, and let me pause here for a second. All right. So now, since Castor is to real or Cage has realized that everyone in the project is now dead, and that no one's going to come for him anytime soon, Castor is to want to ask Pollock if there's any way for people to get these boots off, these magnetic boots. And so we go on, and like Pollock is say, it's like, well, the only way you can get your boots off is by like you being in so much trouble that they like electroshock you. And so Castor immediately, or Cage is to immediately go on to find a guard that is to give him a light, and the guy's like, no, I'm not going to give anything up to you. And so like Cage just starts beating the crap out of him. It's like, hey, anybody got a light? Hey, anybody got like he asked for a cigarette and then he asked for a light, and he's like, hey, anybody got a light? So we have Walton who gives like Cage this light of his cigarette, as we have Don Bloom. I believe it's Don Bloom. If I'm saying that wrong, I apologize. Excuse me. But yeah, the guy who is the host of Monster Vision. Yeah, John Bloom. My bad. John Bloom. The guy who hosted Monster Vision is setting up freaking Cage to get like electrocuted. And that was so cool. So we go on, and Cage is to convince Dubov to help him, and like, hey, I didn't do anything with your wife or your daughter, and so like, if anything, like I think that we should just get out of here. And so Dubov kind of wakes up, and we of course have Cage who cigarettes somebody's hand and tries to get out of his chair. And so we have Dubov who tells Cage here, it's like, out. And he's like, yeah, let's get out. So a prison break happens. Everybody's going wild. A bunch of prisoners are all going on and going wild and crazy. We have Dubov that ends up kind of slipping and falling to his death, sadly, as like Cage is trying to hold on to Dubov, and Dubov just falls to his death. So Cage is to go on and is to scramble his way out of here, and is to realize that there's no helicopter here, there's nobody he can go on and like at gunpoint try to like sneak his way out of here. And so we just have Cage who just decides to like just jump off this thing and swim his way back to where, of course, he is to find allies, because we have Travolta coming back into the office, and a lot of people are telling him like, oh, well, it seems like Castor Troy is to escape, and everybody's thinking it's like, well, there's no way that he's going to come back to the States. And Travolta's like, well, I think you'd be wrong. We also had the moment when Sean was still Sean, and after they were gone in to catch Castor Troy, Sean was taking this bottle that they were rewarding him for, like, him catching this thug. And Sean turns around and he's like, well, like let's remember all the people that ended up having to die or ended up getting hurt during this raid. And so like everybody's like, God, like can't you just take a freaking like a good job for once? Because when Sean is to go on and is to change into like being when Travolta is to change to being Castor Troy, a lot of people can tell the difference. We have like a bunch of uh, Sean's coworkers that are saying it's like, man, like, did you finally get a surgical like procedure being done from getting your that stick out of your ass? And so Sean is like, yeah, great, because he is this drastically different people or drastically different person. So Travolta goes home and is to not even recognize what his house is, and all of a sudden the only way he's to recognize it is because Eve is just kind of outside, and he's like, "Oh, I guess that is that house. I guess this is my house." So our Travolta makes his way to meet with Eve, and Eve's like, "Well, yeah, like how is it you were to, of course, not even like be home that often that you wouldn't even recognize your own house?" And we have it where Travolta is just saying like, well, like every one of these houses all look the same, and the only way that he could have recognized his own house is with Eve on the outside of it. So we have Travolta that goes home and is to mention to Cage when he meets up with him, and like, "Ooh, wee, you good looking, you hot." He goes on and tells him like, "Yeah, I'm gonna sleep with your wife," and that's what he ends up doing. That's his master plan. Travolta goes on and reads his own wife's, or reads Eve's diary, and is to say that they haven't been entangled for 2 months. They haven't been together for 2 months, and so Sean is like, or Travolta is like this guy. So we have Sean, of course, that is dealing with like Jamie and her like teen rebellion, as Archer is to go home, and or Travolta is to go home to have Jamie, who is to be smoking, and Travolta comes into the room to just take some smokes, and he's like, "Papa's got a brand new bag," yeah, and does all this, yeah, like dancing around and all this stuff. So Travolta is also to dance around with his wife, making her just kind of feel a little bit like, man, like he's like drastically has changed. Um, so we go on in the later part of the film, and Travolta is having to go to Mikey's grave, where, of course, Eve is to mention that they took their kid, or Castor Troy's to take their kid away from them, and so on and so forth. So Travolta is dealing with all of this stuff. So we then go on and we have Travolta, who is talking to Pollock, and Travolta is telling Pollock, it's like, well, hey, like you should be squealing right now. You should be telling everybody all kinds of information, making me look good. And Pollock is like I don't know. And so Travolta is to like say, it's like, well, hey, like we got to go on and like play up to the fact, because I need to be this big lavish hero, um, for everything to just kind of start working in our favor. So Travolta goes on to the LA Community Center, is to be able to have the combination of this bomb to be able to undetonate it, because we have some bomb squad people who are to immediately like try to figure out this bomb. And so Travolta's like, well, hey, what should we do? And they're like, well, we should just leave. Like these bomb guys are like, yeah, like this thing is gonna go off, there's no way we can just fix it. So Travolta's like, leave, everybody leave, I'll just figure it out. So Travolta goes on and and disarms this bomb, and so now he has all this press conference, and like he's having this bomb like up in the air, And so we go on here and we have like everybody who's like, well, hey, like for anybody who is to go on and hear this, like, what do you want to like say next? And we have Travolta who's like, well, interception, ball's on our side now, or ball is on our court now. And so supposedly when Cage is in the prison, he's to hear this and he's just like, oh my god. So Cage goes off and is to uh, make his way back to guys like Dietrich and Sasha and all the kind of guys that we saw Sean interrogate earlier when he was Sean. So Cage, of course, is to make his way to talk with these guys, and they immediately are giving him these kind of these drugs and all these things to just kind of have him just kind of like, whew, like so. We have Dietrich who's asking like, well, hey Cage, like, what's the next move? And so Cage is like, well, I want to find Travolta because I know where he lives. And they're like, well, hey, how do you know that information? And Cage is like, well, I've been sleeping with his wife. It's like, okay, sure. And it's like, well, what is the, like, I'm sure this guy is like a security code. And it's just like, well, it's like his son's birthday. So it's like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So Cage is to mention that he wants to go and find Sean Archer and take his face off. And then so Dietrich is to go on and be like, wait a minute, so wait it. You want his face off. And so we go on, we have Cage who is just kind of high in some drug, and so he's looking in the mirror and he's like he's just like I'm Sean. but I'm Castor. I'm me. And so all of a sudden he's like, I'm Sean Troy, I'm Castor Archer. And then all of a sudden he like turns around and he's just like, and Sasha is just gonna be really ticked at Castor. He knocks him out. And so when Castor is kind of wake up from his high, he then is to be meted by Sasha and is to be meted by his son, who is Adam, who he is supposedly 5 years old. And I guess conveniently, we have it where Castor was to never go on and meet up with his actual son. So there's some convenience here. But when Cage is to hug Adam here, he all of a sudden is thinking that this is Michael. And we have all of a sudden where like Sasha is having to pull Adam away because it's like, hey, you're scaring him. So all of a sudden we go on and we have it where Pollock and Travolta, like, they're all here to go on and like do this whole raid to try to get after Cage here. So we go on, and so we of course have Travolta that is to raid through all these FBI guys. We have this big huge fight out where a lot of the times we just have Cage who's holding Adam and like Sasha is running along with him. And so like we have like Cage who's desperately telling people, hey, like, don't shoot because I have a kid. And so like the FBI guys are kind of pulling back because they're just not wanting to shoot this kid, of course. So we have a lot of times where they're like protecting this kid, and so like the kid keeps getting handed off between either Dietrich or Sasha, or we have at one point where the kid is to go on and just kind of just be standing with his headphones listening to the Wizard of Oz song, and he's just kind of he's just standing there, and all of a sudden we have Cage, who is to grab the Atom kid and kind of flip him, or kind of like he's to flip Cage and then grab this kid and try to avoid him from getting shot up here. So we have at one point that Dietrich is to shield both Sasha and Adam here, and he ends up getting shot in the neck. And so Cage is to find Dietrich, and he's like, "Hey man, we've had some fun times," as he drops to the ground and dies. So here's where we have the mirror scene where Cage and Travolta are back to back with one another, and Travolta's like, "You know what? I don't know what it's worse, like your face or your body. Like, I don't know what's worse." So we go on, and Travolta's like, "Well, hey, if plan A can't work, how about we just kill one another?" So they go on, and they're looking at this two-way mirror where they can see one another, and so they try to shoot one another, but both of them kind of move out of the way so no one shoots anybody. So at the same time, miraculously. So we go on, and this just leads to like Cage and Travolta like shooting it out and trying to run away. And so Cage is to get on this rooftop, and he is to see Pollock. And so Cage is to go on and try to like swing with this rope and knock down Pollock, so he goes flying from this big chunk of glass like setup that's on this rooftop. He falls to his death, to where Travolta is watching on as his brother is now dead, and he is grieving heavily. And we have this one FBI agent who's just like, "Well, hey, like, why are you grieving Loomis? Why are you grieving for Pollock?" And so we go on, and we have Travolta, who shoots Loomis and is just kind of go on and continue grieving for his brother as he's shooting Cage. So Cage runs off, and we have Cage running off to Eve as Eve is at home. And so Cage is to explain to Eve that he is who he is. Mentioning that, of course, and I'm trying to get this right because I'm trying to like perfectly plan all this. So Cage goes on and is to mention like the last time that he left, like where he was, and before he went on this mission. And Cage is also trying to explain that he has Castor's face. Man, one thing that's really funny is always to like see like this movie and The Wicker Man, where like the Wicker Man, like Nicolas Cage is just like cussing like a motherfucker. It's always like, it's so interesting. I've never seen an actor before that when they cuss, like it's always just like, man, like this is better than anybody cussing in the world. Like the way like Nicolas Cage just delivers lines is way more interesting than anybody else does. And I never think he gets enough credit for that. So we go on, and we have Cage, who's to mention about blood type and how Eve can realize that like Travolta is to not have the right blood type, and that is to possibly convince her that she is to uh, be like sleeping with the wrong guy. Because Travolta is to go on at one point and is to wine and dine his wife, is to massage her foot, and is to go on and like Eve, I've done something and you're not gonna like it. I read your diaries. As we also have a moment where Travolta is going to his office, and he says the same line to his superior, who of course is to be Victor Pizarro or Lazaro. My bad. So we have Travolta who's like I'm going to tell you the truth, and it's something you're not going to like. And that's when he goes on and he like freaking jugular and freaking heart and freaking takes down Lazaro and kills him. And we have Travolta that tells everybody that this guy's to have this like heart attack and he dies. So Travolta is to go on and like sleep with this wife, and it's been such a long time since they've done anything like that. So Cage is to explain that he is who he is, and then he like runs off to try to get this towel and tries to just kind of get out of there. So Eve is to go on and take a blood sample of Travolta and is to test it and realize that this isn't her husband. So Cage is to come back to this hospital and say, it's like, well, thank you for believing me. And he's like, I don't know what I believe. I don't even know if my husband is like dead. And so Cage is to come up with this story about he had taken a girl out for surf and turf. And come to find out that this girl was a vegetarian, so she just ate bread. While eating the bread, she ended up chipping her tooth and on some rice seed, and so they went on and tried to find a dentist who could fix the tooth. And come to find out, the only dentist they could find was drunk and had fixed the wrong tooth. And even though it hurt like hell, Eve still kissed Sean at the end of the night, stating that since Cage is to know this story, he of course is to be the real Sean. So Eve is like, oh my god, like this is crazy. Because she is to have this gun on her, and she is to say, like, I took this from my fake husband. And so Cage is like Eve, put the gun down, as he's like, I'm gonna go very slowly, and he's gonna go on and do the face thing that he does. To just show like who he really is. So I guess the one thing that you could tell who really is the uh, the Sean character is the whole face thing, the whole like weird goofy thing. You'd think you would like during takes you would have probably poked somebody in the eye at some point or something like that. I don't know why that had to be the thing to know who Sean is, but I guess that's an interesting way to just do that. So, so we go on, and so Cage is to go on and have Eve like doctor his wound, or otherwise he's gonna bleed out. So Travolta is to make it to the hospital thinking that something's going horribly awry. And you gotta say about one thing, though. I love it when Travolta is actually a villain. I would much rather have Travolta as a villain than a good guy. Like, I think it just makes all the sense in the world, because Travolta has played so many, like, good guys. Like, it's kind of really much more fascinating because he plays it so well, like, the villain side of things. Like look at Broken Arrow, and you can just kind of like see that he can be like a really great villain. Like even possibly like Swordfish, you can kind of see him as a villain technically in that movie also. Um, but yeah, like really like you love him as the good character, but you can also just be like, he plays such a good bad character also. Just like such a well-rounded actor for Travolta. So we have Travolta that makes it back to the hospital, is questioning why Eve, of course, is to be at this hospital. And Eve is like, well, I'm a doctor. I'm always on call. And Travolta's like, sure. So Travolta goes on and he's like, well, lies and deceit and subterfuge. Man, this is coming out to be a real marriage. So Travolta walks out, and so while Cage is talking to Eve before he leaves and vanishes, come to find out Eve is to tell Cage that, like, well, Lazaro's funeral is going to be soon. So, like, Cage is like, okay, well, I'm going to go on and come after him then. So, Cage is to go on, and when he was to talk to Sasha, he's like, well, I'm sorry about all the things that I've probably done in the past and stuff like that, and or some of the stuff that I'd said. And so we have Sasha, who's to arrive with Cage while they're going on and holding everybody up at this funeral. Because when they go on and they do this funeral, Travolta is to go with Eve, and Travolta's like, well, hey, where is Jamie? Because I forgot about the whole scene where Travolta goes on and Jamie is to come with a guy named Carl, who's the guy from That 70s Show, and he has to go on and like break this glass and drag this guy out and beat the crap out of him. And then he's like, hey, like, tell her you're sorry. Mean it. And so just starts clocking him. And then like Travolta like is to grab Jamie back in the house and is to like, well, hey, like, if you dress like a goblin and ghoul and stuff like that, people are gonna think that you're gonna go on and trick or treat or something like that. Like something like that. It's like if you dress up like every night is Halloween, uh, like it's some goofy saying like that. And so we have it where Travolta is trying to have going like deep and to say like the only reason why Jamie is to look drastically different every single night is because she's still like grieving over the loss of her brother, and like that's why she's trying to be this rebellious, this character who is to go on and just consistently not be who she really is, to just try to escape. And so we also have Travolta, who ends up giving uh, Jamie a Belisson, like a butterfly knife, and is to go on and like, hey, like, go on and stab it into and squeeze it, so that way it continues to bleed out, to be able to defend herself. So now that I got all that out of the way, there's a whole reason for that. So, and I completely spaced out about it because there's so many things to cover. So, going to this funeral. So, Travolta's asking Eve, of course, about the, like, well, hey, where's Jamie? And Eve, of course, to tell Travolta, it's like, well, she didn't come to Mikey's funeral. What makes you think that she's going to come to Lazaro's? Like, she stole $50 from my wallet, and she's going to go and just go off wherever. So Travolta's like, there's something that's not right about that. So they go on and they go to this funeral, and we have Cage, who is to have this photo of Mikey when he was to be at Eve's home talking to her. So at this funeral, we go on and we have this Lazaro thing, and so Travolta is kind of going through this funeral, and we all of a sudden see that there's some altar boy that is talking to Travolta, saying like, hey, I have somebody who's to give you this message. And Travolta's to look at it, and it's a picture of Mikey, and he's like, you son of a... and chucks it off to the side, realizing that he should be hanging back because Cage is after him. Cage is looking for him. So they hang back, and so Cage is to kind of get ready into being into this church, and so we have Travolta kind of making his way, but this time around he's to think a little bit smarter than harder, and so Travolta is to have Sean's family like all there, and he's like, well, hey, I have Eve here, but I'm gonna go on and get we're getting Jamie also. So all of a sudden they have like Eve kind of in the middle of all this. All guns are being like tossed out here. Sasha is to come in here to try to even things out. So Sasha is to go and tackle Eve to the ground so they can start blazing it up with all these guns and all these bullets and all these whatevers. So they go on, and we have both Sean and Castor who are chasing after one another, and all of a sudden we have Jamie who is to make her way into this church, and so all of a sudden uh, we have like Cage who's looking at Jamie, and he's just very confused, and he just grabs her and he's like, okay, like I'm gonna try to protect Jamie, so that way she doesn't get killed here. So all of a sudden we have both Sean and we have both Castor both duking it out, the wrestling, and so we have a moment where all of a sudden Cage's like voice box just changes and now he sounds like Travolta, and so Jamie has this gun and she has to choose between who to shoot here, and Cage sounds like Travolta, so he's like listen to me, I'm your father, like so, and we have Travolta is like he killed your brother, Jamie. Shoot him, Jamie. Come on, Jamie, you could do it. So weirdly, we have like Jamie who shoots Cage in the arm, and Travolta grabs Jamie. Is like, my daughter would never shoot so wide, and so Travolta goes on and is to call Jamie his peach. That he licks her face, and I'm like, oh my god, as Travolta is to run off. So Eve is to make the call to the FBI stating that, like, hey, like, this is what's going on. I know that this may be confusing, but I'm going to explain this all to you. Explain about the whole, like, blood test and whatever. And so this goes and leads to this kind of like this bridge, this pier kind of battle where they go on and they have to grab these boats. And so now we have this, like, boat, this speedboat kind of battle, which all leads to one boat going flying off and crashing as both of them are now on this boat and they're duking it out, and they're having this like anchor and like they're doing all this like chain work and all this stuff, like having one character just kind of holding onto this boat. So we go on, and eventually at some point we have these two that are both back on this boat, and all of a sudden realizing that they're going to smash right into this part of land. And so once they do, they both go flying. And so after this, we have them just kind of duking it out with a harpoon gun and a number of just items, like random, like kind of things that look like just sharp objects that they can go and battle it off here. So we have, of course, at one point where we have Travolta realizing that he's going to lose here, and so Travolta is just to say here, it's like, well, like every time that you're gonna see my face in the mirror, you're gonna think of me. And like that's the only way that he can really think that he can get like a real like defeat here, is just be like, well, you're going to be tortured by looking at my face every night, because like he's going to be the guy that wins, but still like Troy just wants this consolation prize. So they try to go on and have like Cage tries to shoot off the harpoon gun, but Travolta is to grab a piece of it to where it doesn't go off quite that easily. And then eventually, like, they go on and they kind of like they fiddle with the harpoon gun, and then finally Travolta gets stabbed with it. So we have Sean, who is still Nicolas Cage, and so he sits back, and we have like Buzz, and we have like some of the FBI guys who are just like, hey, like Archer, like, are you okay? And he's like, did you just call me Archer? And they're like, well, yeah, that's who you are. And he's like, oh, okay, good, now everybody can figure this out. So they end up finding like this this high-end surgeon from God knows where to perform this procedure. And so we had it, of course, where Sean was to mention before that he wanted that wound, like, or the bullet wound back, but when he was to go through the first time around. But this time around, we just have it where Sean mentions that he doesn't want the wound anymore. Like it's a thing that is now resolved, and because we have at one point where Sean was talking to Eve, mentioning like, man, like I always want to shift around this wound to be like closer to my heart, so that way, like I would have died and Michael would have been fine, and so like that's the kind of the interesting part of this film. So Castor is now dead. Archer, of course, is to now go on, and we had a moment, of course, where Sasha was to get shot protecting uh, Sean, and so she ends up saying like, "Hey, like, let me pause for a second." Technical difficulties, my bad. Things happen, but at least we're almost done anyways. So that's always great when really it could have been just like I could have been done, and then oh okay. But anyways, so we have of course Archer go or Sean go through the surgery, and Sean is to come back home and is to hug both Eve and is to hug both Jamie, and is to then show them that there's this kid named Adam who is to need a home, and they're like, well, of course, like bring him on in, and he'll be kind of replacing Mike here, and he looks just like Mike anyway. So that's kind of the funny thing about this movie is we just have like this kid who has the exact same hairstyle, exact same everything as this other kid, and so it'll just kind of feel like they never lost this kid. And so like that's how the movie just ends. And so with that said, I think I'm just gonna get the heck out of here. Surprising, all I needed was another minute or two, but technical problems happened, so that's always great. Just when I'm like, man, I could have been done, but oh well. At the end of the day, I'm just gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.